Paul Bowman, CEO of Wexer, the digital fitness specialist who deliver over 25 million fitness experiences through our partners worldwide. Welcome to the Wexer podcast, where I'll be speaking to industry experts to bring you insights and advice to support your business journeys. In today's episode, I'll be chatting with an old friend, Adam. Oh, actually, your last name. I always trip on your last name. How do I pronounce your last name quickly?
Halvorsen.
Halvorsen. I didn't want to butcher it. You know, I mean, how many people say Bowman rather than Bowman? I'd rather just stop. So Adam is the CEO of NuForm. NuForm helps businesses launch and scale digital products by designing, building, and optimizing apps, platforms, and AI-powered solutions. Their team brings products, designs, and engineering together to turn ideas into real, high-performing technology that lasts. Adam, other than butchering your last name, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Mr. Bowman. I'm really good. Thanks for. It's great to see you. And like you said, it's been a bit too long. And but yeah, great to see you again.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking we've probably worked together for what, over 7 years?
8 years, I guess. So at least, yeah. I mean, I think 2015, 16, something like that we started working together.
Yeah.
Or was it? Around that.
Just thinking, I've probably learned out of all the people from a technology space and learning about how other industries are bringing particular solutions for me, bringing it to the fitness market, I've probably learned the most. You're one of the ones I've learned the most of. So I'll start with a thank you first.
I appreciate it.
It's okay. And then I think for listeners, no, you're not coming from the fitness industry, so tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to become CEO of NuForm.
Yeah, thanks. So, I guess without going into War and Peace, my career started really in sort of like, I cut my teeth in sort of ad sales, recruitment, kind of dotted around a little bit, but got a good grounding in sort of commercial roles and stuff like that. But I guess to sort of accelerate to like the late 2000s, obviously a little device called the iPhone, which, came out, and I think 2007, 2008. And I could see the direction of travel. So I think, luckily I had a family contact who had a contact in the kind of mobile tech space. And so sort of 2007, 2008, that's kind of when I got into let's say tech and I guess sort of mobile at that point. So I started working with a Finnish mobile kind of web business. So they specialize more kind of on optimizing mobile websites as opposed to kind of being in the app space. It was kind of like an early SaaS play in a way, where it's like we would go and sell to businesses like, okay, we want to optimize for mobile. How do we do that? And this was before the times of things like responsive design and all of that kind of stuff. So so it was great. Started off as a sales guy there and was there for 4 years. Ended up as UKMD. So really enjoyed it. Great bunch of guys, and anyone who's been to Helsinki knows that it's a mega place. But yeah, I kind of saw that the direction of travel was much more kind of app based. I think sort of what we saw when the iPhone was launched was kind of like marketing campaigny gimmicky stuff. It was like the Carling iPint where you drank a beer with your phone, and or like tape measure apps and stuff like that. And sort of around 2011, 2012, when I was thinking of moving, I could see that things were becoming much more strategic. Like businesses were actually seeing that, mobile or apps or platforms were going to kind of be a lot more mission critical or business critical. So I made the move to join a business called Golden Gecko, which, and this is around 2012, and they were kind of, I guess, leaders in that space, in the app dev space, really across Europe, if not actually globally. So, when I joined, they were already doing things like, they were doing all of Heathrow Airport's apps. They were doing, they were working with big businesses and sort of early adopters of that kind of more strategic level of mobile applications. So Yeah, so I kind of joined at that point, and again, sort of, I guess went back a little bit in terms of job title, but joined kind of primarily in a sales or commercial function. But yeah, just absolutely loved it, and started working with the likes of Unilever and Bacardi, and sort of tons of big global brands, helping them to deliver apps and sort of solutions to the market. So yeah, so like I kind of went like that for a few years, and then I guess you hit 2014, 15. And I guess we start to see the sort of emergence of digital transformation, or whatever phrase you want to kind of call it, and things started getting much more strategic. And Golden Gecko were acquired by a business that quite well, and
Yep.
where we actually met, and obviously they sort of were much broader in terms of their scope, in terms of what they did. So again, it was much more kind of IT services, as opposed to sort of necessarily just sort of app and platform stuff. They did a lot more broader services, things like commerce and big data, and all of that kind of stuff. And so I kind of got on that train as well. But I think sort of 2016, we started focusing quite heavily on things like customer experience and CX, and sort of like how to approach digital from a strategic lens, which was great. So yeah, and then again, without going into too much depth, sort of up until like sort of 2018, 19, I was traveling a lot. As I think I came to San Diego for one of your events, which was fantastic. And so like, yeah, but I kind of ended up there as VP of sales for basically everything outside of the US. And so sort of a bit of leadership, still very much kind of selling and helping the business to grow, all of that stuff. But yeah, to get to sort of 2020, which is when I kind of well, obviously COVID happened, so it wasn't probably the best time to start a business. But I'd had a passion my whole life to start something, and the company I was at was superb and taught me an awful lot. But I just wanted ownership. I wanted something that I could own, something that I could build, and also like I wanted to work with the clients and on the kind of projects that I wanted to work on. Like one of the things that I love working with you is, we worked in real partnership. I kind of felt a part of the business, and not saying the company I was at didn't do that, but I kind of just wanted, that's what I wanted to make impact on businesses, help them be successful in digital, that kind of thing. So hopefully that wasn't too long, but that's a bit of my background.
No, well, the background's quite extensive, so it's actually quite hard to shorten that. Like, I guess NuForm now, like for you, what does the role look like day to day, and what are you focused on right now?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, you introduced NuForm perfectly. So but in terms of my role, like I mentioned, I guess I've been primarily commercial focused and kind of strategic focused. So my role is CEO and founder really is focusing on on growth, on our positioning, and I think ultimately, look, with the shifts in the market right now, and obviously what's happening at the moment is easily the biggest impact that's ever happened in this industry, and obviously I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, so my role really is to kind of stay close to the market. I'm not sure if you ever met Daniel. So he was one of the founders of Golden Gecko, but he kind of ended up in a CTO function at that business, but he's also one of the co-founders of NuForm. So he's much more of a techie than I am, but we work very, very close together to kind of like separate the value from hype, if that makes sense. So so I'm kind of spending a lot of time right now thinking, okay, being honest, is like, where do we best
what can create true value?
Yeah, exactly. And with our skill set and with our experience and all of that kind of stuff, how we make sure that we're offering the right thing? And there's a lot of hype right now. So
I know.
but there's also a lot of good development. So yeah, I think in terms of what am I focused on? Look, it's from running a business, it's always about growth, but it's also about making sure that we're doing a great job for our customers. But it's also transitioning this completely nuts period in the in the best way that we can.
We're going to get into that, but I want to, because of course we listen. A lot of entrepreneurs listen to this. What was the big leap moment? Was there a big leap moment, or it was just, I know you said you wanted ownership, and I've always felt like, and with your personality, you've probably been the most entrepreneur I ever knew inside a company. So I understand that it was quite a natural leap, but was there a particular moment that actually said, I'm just going to go do this? Because, there's a lot of people that are sitting on some great ideas that maybe will never ever get seen because they just haven't got the moment that they actually leap into this.
Yeah,
any advice you can share?
Yeah, no, I don't know if it was necessarily one moment. I kind of wish it was, because it'd be a simpler answer. I think it was more it was more gradual. It was more over time. Like you said, I think it was always in me. But I think, look, I'll be honest with you as well. The travel and the kind of demand in my previous business, or in the previous business I worked in, I absolutely loved it. But it's like when you've got a family, when you've got, again, I think balance is an overused word, but I guess that sort of was an element. And I just thought, what, if I'm going to be busting my gut for, and I really, as you probably remember, I remember. I kind of go full tilt at things. So I
Adam's the guy that you can WhatsApp no matter what, and he'll respond in 30 seconds.
I think, I think your ex-CTO may have WhatsApped me more times than most, actually. But but no, I've always wanted to be hyper responsive, and I think it's really important in business. But I guess I always felt, which is. Yeah, exactly. And look, from my side, it's genuine. If people are putting a lot of trust in us, then I want to be like that. But I think I just got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm seriously grinding here. I'm spending time away from my family. I kind of talk a big game, and at the time I was like, okay, I'd had a decent kind of year or two in terms of saving some cash, and I definitely think in terms of. I remember when I was 20, I remember a guy saying to me distinctly, really clearly, he said, when you've got 6 months savings in the bank, you should start a business. And I had a bit more than that, but it was like that really for me was that moment. I had a really good couple of quarters, and I just said to my wife, look, I have no idea how this is going to go, but I've got some ideas. I think I can do a good job. I've learned from the best at the company that I was at. So yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't like a light bulb moment. It just kind of happened over time.
Some people take probably too much risk by having those light bulb moments. So I think it was a smart move. And then so for you, let's get into product development. I guess let's start with a broad question in terms of what trends are you seeing right now with the companies that you're working with. And how they're approaching product development. Because it's a vast world. Lots changing.
It is, huge amounts changing. Look, there's a very long answer, and I guess there's a short answer to this, which is, the biggest trend in sort of product development, I guess I'm seeing is obviously sort of loosely AI, and I guess we'll come into that in more detail. But I think low code, sort of like low code, no code is really changing everything. So platforms like Lovable, platforms like Replit, are really changing sort of, I guess, not only how companies or companies of different sizes are approaching product development, but it's also expectations. What now people are thinking is possible from product development. So, what we're getting, for example, is a lot of kind of more startups and scale ups who are coming to us and saying, look, we want to build X, Y, Z. we've done a little bit of this in Lovable, or we've done that, and hey, surely like now we've done this, it's just a case of like getting it over the line type thing. And obviously,
build some infrastructure. So simple. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So but there's a really good side to it, right, which is it's accelerating everything. Yes, it's changing expectations. Yes, we're having very, very different conversations, but in a way, they're really good conversations. It's kind of because we were. Yeah, go ahead.
Like I just think about us and how much we can now speed up. If there's a trend, we can play in the space quickly to see if it's trend or hype without the huge cost and infrastructure to build something. Because we've already got the infrastructure, our products really well, we can go play in a space as long as we keep it simple. But we can stand it up really quickly to test things. I guess that must be a godsend and an annoyance at the same time for yourselves when working with clients. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that's bang on. I mean, and look, that's the real positive side, right? If you've got an existing platform, you can use these tools to massively mitigate risks, massively kind of accelerate innovation, experimentation, that type of thing. But then, the challenge comes actually, when you want to actually get serious and get more complex. So totally. No, I think it is a godsend, and I think it's going to be really interesting. And again, I'm sure we'll get into more depth on it. But yeah, I mean, look, that's what I would see is the biggest trend right now. It's and sort of it's impacting product development across sort of every different facet or every different element of the kind of product life cycle. So, whether it's kind of the upfront research and strategy, whether it's design, whether it's front end development, back end development, QA, it's
and and this is just a straight personal. I'm always going off script, but I told you I would. And because I look at it as well about I think so many of the great businesses that are operating in especially the tech space are just so hyper focused. They're focused on what they do really, really, really well. I think actually I would say AI is kind of made more the good leaders really step up and go, no, this is what we're good at, this is what we stay, and we'll play in the space, but not really do it. But I also feel like there's a flip side of it where people don't know where to start with some of the innovation stuff. So their businesses are getting eroded pretty damn dramatically, and they're kind of burying their head in the sand a little bit. I feel like there's two. Like, do you think it's kind of becomes like a leader take most? In a lot of industries, or is that just too broad? Again, I'm coming from a very fitness lens here.
So do you mean like as in first movers are kind of winning, or
I think the companies have really got a clear core competency and core advantage that they can, they have, and if they're really, really focused on what they do really, really well, which is, of course, solving problems for their customers, I'm looking at the SaaS businesses and stuff, and I know they've been hit in the marketplace, but they're still fundamentally really solid and they're needed in many spaces. But I feel like a lot of the bigger organizations that they're getting eroded by a lot of others that don't have that focus because they've always had such a global view and they play in so many spaces, but now smaller teams can go beat them up. So I feel like there's quite a dramatic shift in that regard. Like, definitely. I guess it goes back to, maybe I'm answering my own question. You fundamentally need to find a product market fit and a core competency that is quite hard to replicate. Maybe that's the answer, but I'd like your view on it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think I think obviously what it's enabling is huge acceleration for smaller players. It's just making the whole not just in fitness but in so many different industries. It's making everything so much more accessible, so much quicker. You can do so much more with less budget. And I think the reality is that there's no question that smaller players are going to kind of eat the bigger guys' lunches. I think you hit on something really, really important there, which is actually knowing the problem that you solve and kind of, like I look at these kind of bigger companies and they're almost so broad that, like you rightly said, they kind of lose that sort of, that sort of niche, or they lose that kind of real core focus. And so no, I totally agree. And
I guess, but what would be your advice for leaders thinking about balancing innovation and building products? if they're coming to you and they were quite broad brush, probably had success for many years, but looking at it now, where would you start?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think one of the biggest mistakes that often companies make, and you touched on it there, is they get kind of sucked into the tech. They basically kind of think, all right, there's this new thing, there's this new shiny thing. How do we now just go and do some stuff,
Yeah,
in it? And
features don't solve business problems, as I keep telling my tech team, and they believe that now.
Absolutely, yeah. It's only taken 10 years, but yeah, but I mean, look, you'll be honest. I mean, we'll be honest, right? Most businesses just never get to that point.
Right.
So
yeah.
So I think companies like are starting with tech, and they're not stepping back and taking effectively the right approach. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, around 2015, 16, CX, service design, human centricity became a major thing, and that's really stuck with me.
But
but
I think on that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad, but I think, and look, it's yes, it's evolved, but it's still a massive thing, and anybody listening in whatever industry that they are, I still think it's just so pivotal to when you're starting out, and or when you're trying to form a concept for a business. But I think just because things can kind of move faster, it doesn't mean that you kind of skip the right steps and you skip the kind of, I mean, let's just call it validation, or evidence that drives the direction that's going to take you. So yeah, it's a bit like a bit like an F1 car, right? If you've got the wrong driver in an F1 car, you're just going to go in the wrong direction. So and again, the right driver will get you somewhere really quickly. So yeah, I mean, I think when a business is starting out, with this stuff, we've worked with quite a few companies in terms of sort of both like integrating AI into existing products, but I think also, we're working with businesses who are coming and saying, like, where do we start, and from a product development perspective, and the kind of way that we see it is almost like a Venn diagram with three circles, with with the center point being the sweet spot. So like if I was to advise someone to to build a new product, or whether it's AI or not, it's the same principle. I mean, I think a lot of people just forget that AI is really just software development. It's not really that different in terms of what a company will actually do and the processes that they will take. But yeah, so like if you picture these three circles, so the first one, we would sort of say usability, or that kind of human centric kind of, okay, how do we create a product or a service that actually it creates a connection with the end user? How do we get into that kind of consumer psychology piece, sort of consumer behavior kind of type area? And basically, in simple terms, is how do we actually build something that someone wants to use? It's great having a nice idea, but if no one wants to freaking use the thing, then it doesn't really help. The second circle is kind of like that viability piece. So like, what is the business value behind what you're trying to do? It's all well and good having something that someone might want to use, but if it doesn't make any money, or if it doesn't generate any ROI, or it doesn't create efficiency, then again, it's completely pointless. And then you've got the third circle, which is feasibility. So like technical feasibility, e.g., based on the business problem that we want to solve, actually, what is the right technical approach? Could it be this new shiny thing? Could it be this, this old thing that actually is perfectly suitable for what we're trying to do? But sort of making sure that, you're building something, and this goes back to the kind of low code, no code piece, which is you actually doing something that can be scalable and actually can grow, which, I remember working with you guys early on. It's like you start, and then you evolve very quickly into something very, very, very different. You start to learn what your customers want to tell you. You evolve with different requests from different customers. So my advice, and hopefully I'm still answering your question here, is, but my advice would be, to anyone starting, or where do you start, is, I'm not talking about like 3 to 6 months of upfront strategy. You say that to any CEO, and they're just like, I'm not doing that. because people just want to get started. But that would be my kind of take. And the good news is that these tools are massively accelerating that process. So yeah, so look, the danger is just simply building the wrong thing faster. And I think, so my advice in terms of where to start: be data driven, be evidence driven, kind of follow that rough idea of that Venn diagram. And, I think that will give you a good start.
So, I just actually came back from Asia, which is one of the big conferences called Beyond Active. And it was really interesting because, I can stand there and talk about AI and how much it's improved us. But I guess we have a very, the business, a lot of duplication of code. We used to have a lot of back-end, front-end developers doing the same thing every single day. AI has really just taken that out. So we've been able to drop costs dramatically, take away a lot of that manual stuff, and really focus our solutions architects on really trying to help the operators that we serve far better. So I think we're a proper use case that's very successful AI. What surprised me is most of the leaders in the room couldn't actually go to a one case that actually feels like they've done well with AI and they've spent mega bucks on it. And I feel like that's across the board. A lot of S&P 500. Is this something you're seeing that, I guess, is it, if we re-engineer this, is it just not being clear on what the problem that they're solving in the first place is? Or, going back to your point, it's, AI is still development, right? So you're just pointing it at the wrong place where it doesn't have viability, either commercially usability. Is this the framework that you would go through essentially?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you've probably read it. There was a MIT report, I think last year, that said basically like 95% of AI initiatives ultimately were failing, right? So I guess we kind of need to distinguish between two things, right? You're talking that there's two angles, I guess, that you could answer this, right? So one, which is AI helping companies to work better. So like you're mentioning, right? Leveraging tools, that type of thing that, and obviously we can get into that. And I mean, I'm sure for a lot of people, right, Codex is just things like Codex is just blowing people's minds because it's the UI is making complex kind of AI, for businesses so much more accessible. But then there's the other piece, which is actually serving customers better, right? So one would be tooling. The second one is actually, okay, so how are we using AI to make the customer experience better within digital products? And so so going back to that report, they use this term called pilot purgatory. So, a huge amount of what companies are investing in building, they're just getting shelved. So, they're trying to. I mean, we're talking to some pretty big businesses about this, and the issue is every conversation we have, someone is hoping for this silver bullet kind of answer of oh, here's this magic thing which is just going to solve AI for you. And so look, I think it does tie into a little bit of the kind of Venn diagram piece that I mentioned. But I don't want to sound like a laggard, but I still think where we are in terms of actual product use cases or sort of AI actually integrating into things like workflows, user experience, that kind of thing. I still think we're in the kind of phase of focused use cases and sort of single kind of areas where things can help. So to give an example, if you're going to integrate AI into an existing product, there are some obvious really great use cases. So things like recommendation engines, improved search functions, customer support, it's really, really good at simplifying journeys, accelerating journeys, making improving that user experience. But I think personally where we're at still is a couple of steps away from kind of AI being this kind of, I don't know if Trojan horse is the right way, but this kind of, I mean, a good example was I was at the AI summit recently, and Lloyd's Bank have got 300 AI engineers within their business. But really still what they're focusing on is actually primarily sort of individual use cases. So if you think about a narrow use case versus something like applying for a mortgage, the amount of different orchestration layers that, to do that kind of complex process, that's going to be really, really challenging. So, so I think, and then again, you kind of touched on how you guys are using various tools to accelerate things. I mean, that's massive, right? I mean, I think that's where the such big gains are happening really, really quickly. I mean, we actually did a study recently for us in terms of, like how much is this really transforming the way in which we're working? Exactly like you mentioned, in terms of things like, front end development, back end development, testing, etc. We're kind of looking at it as like a kind of 30 to 40% kind of efficiency saving, if you will. So
which is a lot. Like if you could see that before there was AI, that's a huge. You're like, okay, everyone would bite your arm off to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, and again, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration because it's different in different areas. But I think, ultimately, look, what it should be enabling companies to do from a tooling perspective is doing a lot more with less. And then on the kind of, like I said, on the product side, I think the idea is, I'm really not surprised that you went to that event and you kind of like everyone was a bit lost, because I think it seems like it should be so obvious. But big businesses are struggling to figure this out still, in my opinion. There's obviously good examples. I mean, the insurance space, for example, is it's really impressive, like what some companies are doing in the kind of back office, the areas of efficiency that they're creating. So examples like that are super interesting. But yeah, it's a long way to go.
Do you see? Well, I personally see it, but please disagree with me if you don't. Is that we're just going to have, and I'm coming from New Zealand right now in Auckland, and of course we're predominantly small businesses. I think it's the greatest opportunity for small businesses, right? Like there's predominantly teams of 20 and 30 now can go compete against product teams of 300, 400, where you used to get beaten up because you couldn't compete with their development power. Now you can. So, like, is it the same in what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So look, I think there's a couple of caveats to that, right? So it depends on what you're building. I think it depends on sort of, I think number one, your type of enterprise or like your type of business. So yeah, like for example, going back to things like Lovable and Replit and stuff like that, like the enterprise is not touching that stuff because ultimately things like, security, data, like edge cases, et cetera, like it's just not good enough. Now, but that's slightly different to kind of what you're saying, right? Which is like, there's no question that small businesses can now have a lot more muscle. But again, I think it depends on, like, what are you actually trying to do? So I would still argue, for example, if you're looking to build a platform like Wexer, as an example from the ground up, I would still suggest that you're going to need, a pretty pretty substantial team, like not huge, but you're going to still need. It kind of goes back to the F1 example, right? If you've got a really powerful tool, but with the wrong, without the right people driving it, or just not enough people driving it, that's like, so for example, like the way that I see how we work is that, like, when we're doing work for other businesses, I don't actually see our team shape necessarily particularly changing that much. Like, I don't really see that's where masses of changes. I think it's more what they can do and what speed they can do it at. So, like, I still think that small businesses are going to have to just accept that they're going to have to invest in relatively substantial product teams. But again, if you're, like, I've got an ex colleague of mine who is running a whole business around basically building MVPs or minimum viable products for like 5 to 10 grand, right? So, and I absolutely love it. But the issue then comes, it's like, okay, but what happens then if you want to scale it? What happens then if you want to go to that next level? So I think it's just making sure that, like, the opportunity definitely is there for smaller businesses. And certainly, what I wouldn't want to do is discourage anybody who's thinking about building a digital product, or to not think that the opportunity is massive, and that the accessibility now is on a completely different level. But without the right kind of, the amount of people I've spoken to who have like, look, yeah, I've built an MVP, and I kind of took it this far. Then I needed an engineer to help me, and I can't believe how long it's taken. And the issue is again, if you go fast, that's great, but if you then have to rebuild it 3 times, it doesn't end up saving you any time, and it just costs the same amount. So
I've been there a few times. So yeah. Infrastructure always comes back to bite you in the ass, I've learned. So just build it from the ground up properly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I honestly, I don't think that's really changed. In terms of like, if you look at some of the low-code tools, for example, like like Lovable and Superbase, it's incredibly powerful, but it has limitations. And again, I think that's the same if you're treating it, even if you're approaching it sort of using, let's say, not using a low-code platform, but you're using AI tools to support you. Obviously, like we all know about Claude Code and Codex, etc. But again, it's the same principle. Like it's gonna reduce errors. It's gonna accelerate process. Someone said to me the other day, like, what about testing? And I'm just like, well, like, shouldn't a developer just be using AI to test what he or she has done? And I'm like, yeah, but the reality is you're still marking your own homework. So like, it's okay, fine, you've got an incredibly powerful tool, but and again, it depends on sort of how you define different roles in a, let's say, a cross-functional team. But yeah, that's kind of my take.
Maybe this is just a trend within the circle of friends I have. Maybe they're just sad, but a lot of them are kind of SaaS business owners, and usually B2B. But they've actually created, which we're pretty inspired by. We're going to create like a Mr. Wexer. So like taking all of how we've dealt with customers and all the rest of it over years and years and years, and start just feeding that with how we're dealing with, like, so in terms of dealing with prospects or dealing with leads that are coming in and going, not as a tool of changing the individual that's doing it, but essentially having them as a platform to go, okay, how would Mr. Wexer deal with this objection, or how would this deal with this complaint, or we've only tested this really lightly. It's pretty powerful. Like, I didn't realize how powerful it is for the team. Like, even just talking about, with our accounts receivable people, they've been probably using it as I thought it was the sales team that would use it the most, to be honest. And it's actually the accounts people that have used it the most in terms of how to deal with. And I'm like, that actually makes some sense. So it's quite interesting to put that out there, and then going, okay, how does the team integrate with it, and how much do they use it? And I would actually say across the board, they're using it on a regular basis, because I think, how many businesses just go, an email comes through, it might be a good one, might be a hard one to deal with. They don't have the advice probably right then and there, especially as a remote workforce, which that solves that gap real quickly, which is quite impressive.
100%. Just to sort of put your take on steroids, I was talking to the CEO of 250-300 million revenue business the other day, and their entire sales process has been basically outsourced to AI. So wow. Their outbound sales guys now don't do any outbound. Simply all that they do is respond to incoming leads that their AI kind of sales funnel has created. So I think that's a pretty kind of staggering example. Also, like you said,
B2B or B2C?
B2C. Yeah.
B2C. Yeah. Okay. That's impressive.
Yeah, and I guess it's an important nuance. Like, it's a different vibe to B2B. But I think from from my perspective, you look at Codex. I don't use anything else now. Like, it basically runs the business, and it's absolutely freaking crazy. And I think obviously what's happening is more and more people, because the user interface is just so much more accessible, I think everyone kind of thought that like Codex and these other kind of platforms were like only for coders or for developers, and then actually you realize how simple it is to integrate different elements, into your business. I mean, and when you start on Codex, you just integrate all of these different tools in your kind of workflow, and it's like I've got this centralized thing that can run my business. So,
Yeah. I had the same thing with Replit, and then of course Codex. I'm going, wow, as an entrepreneur, you can kind of play in the tech space. You can actually have a better conversation because you go, this is easy. But then of course, again, talking about infrastructure, you're like, okay, yeah, we can do that, but this is all the things that we've got to do to put it as a part of our system.
And I think just on that, I mean, I was chatting to a CEO of a manufacturing business the other day, and he was like, I've got this great idea. Like, I'm just going to use Claude to like replace all of these workflows within our business. And actually, wouldn't it be great if like 150 people could be challenged to build their own app to like help with their workflow? And I was like, please do not do that, because you're going to have a huge amount of kind of like data flying all over the place. You're going to have a ton of like separate kind of different workflows that are not connected. So again, like, yeah, I guess what we're kind of realistically saying is for like obvious tasks, things like back office, admin, some sales functions, creating decks and Excel spreadsheets and forecasting. Yeah, it's incredible. But I think, there's that sweet spot. And it's like all AI right now. It takes you X% of the way, and then you very quickly then realize, oh, here's the limitation. And
yeah, but still an amazing tool that's is transforming so many businesses. I guess coming back to the fitness industry though, like where do you see the biggest technology opportunities for the fitness operators right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reason I laugh is because I am going to sound like a bit of a laggard right now. I mean, I remember when I was in San Diego with you.
Yeah.
And
that was the old URSA show. Now it's called HFA, so Half and Fitness Association.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, it was fantastic. Obviously, it was great to meet people from your industry, and but yeah, I mean, look, the biggest. I remember, I think it was like slide 7. And I was like, remember this, which was hyper personalization. And I think at the time, okay, fine, it was probably a little bit digital transformation-y, a little bit kind of aspirational. But I think now with where we're at, I just think personalization is where the opportunity is. I mean, look, and also to be upfront, I don't work day to day in the fitness industry, so I hope that this still applies. But I think from what I've seen, I still haven't really seen particularly great efforts on this. No. And actually, almost like you said, probably smaller players, I think, are doing more interesting things. And obviously, Wexer is doing a really good job at sort of cracking this as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, look, we talked about it years ago. I don't think anything's changed. I guess what I mean by personalization is, is almost like creating ecosystems, right? Like, members, like, I think what's so awesome is you're seeing someone sit down on a machine, whether it's, using, near field technology or whatever, like, it's amazing, like machines can move to your height and weight, and, there's things happening. And again, tell me if there's some obvious things that I'm missing, but, I think it just goes beyond the in-club experience and just purely working out. The amount of data that sort of operators have is just, is nuts. Now I get it. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to kind of store and manage, but again, I think that's where the investment has got to be made. And, I think it's sort of the in-club, out-club journey. And I mean, I remember saying this to you years ago, and I was a member of a pretty high-end gym club. But it's like, they know how many kids I've got. They know kind of like what my diet preferences are. They know what my kind of rough workout routine is, so they can advise on what my recovery should be. Then they can revise on, okay, so you did this workout on a Tuesday. Here's what, your nutrition should be. And look, I'm not saying that that's particularly easy. There's a lot of orchestration involved in that stuff. But I think also there's some real basics there. And again, it doesn't even necessarily have to be that complex and sort of that kind of necessarily end to end. But I think it's trying to kind of pick, those moments where you can actually really massively influence. I guess it's that kind of surprise and delight piece.
Yeah, I like that. And of course, a lot of people listening, and because this has been covered so much in different forums and stuff, would go, oh, well, our CRM system, our data isn't clean enough to get, true value for hyper-personalization. Like, what would be your advice to that?
I think my advice would be start small, like make the investment, like, and again, AI is going to help with that. And I think, like, again, it kind of boils back to sort of what we were talking about earlier, in terms of how you actually are approaching this stuff. Like, you need to understand, like, where are the quick wins, where's the low hanging fruit, how can we kind of assess within the business the biggest opportunity area. I think often it's very easy for people in businesses to sit there and think, wow, this is a huge task, this is going to be super, like, how are we ever going to afford to do this? But I think it's almost like just approach it in a modular level, right? It's a case of sort of tackle one piece at a time, do it in a sort of sensible, scaled kind of roadmap kind of way, which is okay. Like, I mean, if it was me, like, what I would simply do is I would assess sort of the most critical user journeys or workflows within the kind of the whole ecosystem of, let's say, the gym or whatever. Be like, okay, where, like, how do we really understand sort of where those pain points are? Understand, okay, right, we've, understand that data. It doesn't even have to be sophisticated. It's like, just observe where the pain points are and what sort of user journeys are really struggling. And then, then sort of actually say, okay, right, this is an individual area that we can improve. We can, then go and test and prototype it. We can test it with users. Then you think about integrating it into your kind of ecosystem. And then, step by step, then you slowly start to sort of, improve. And then potentially you need to sort of start investing in more infrastructure and stuff like that. But I don't think you have to boil the ocean,
I think your talent is always just simplifying things. Really extremely hard things you simplify very well. So well done to you on that.
Well, I hope, but I hope it doesn't sound too simple, right? I don't want to sit here on my Eiffel Tower and say it's all really easy, but at the same time, like, I think it is that simple. So
no, it is. But I think it's just doing it and then actually starting, rather than having a reason why not to do it as well, right? I think it's a mindset thing. But let's not go into human psychology.
Yeah, but actually, I mean, I think when you look at an economy like we're in at the moment, right, where everybody is freaked out, the first thing that sort of goes is this kind of stuff. Like, people are like, well, I can't go and do this kind of nice innovation thing. We need to just double down on our core element of the business. And I think that's a mistake. I mean, I would say that because obviously I have the lens from this side of the fence. But I think, again, I think it's actually super important. Again, the great thing with all the tools that are happening, that are evolving right now, you can do this much, much faster, much quicker, much more accessible. I mean, even if you just take, for example, like prototyping, the design process, all of that kind of stuff, that used to take days, weeks, months. Literally what used to take months, you can do in 30 minutes. Like I said, I mean, if you're a designer in a business, you're using Codex and you've integrated with Figma, like, there you go.
That's well said. And in terms of, I just, 3 more questions, because I feel like I've held you for a while, but like, what excites you the most in terms of the future of technology and product development and where businesses are heading?
I mean, look, I kind of worry that I've sounded a bit negative to an extent of some of the advancements that are happening. And, look, the idea that anybody can now go from kind of idea to product so much faster is mega. I mean, it's massive, right? And I guess sort of again from a human perspective, with the job market, who knows where that's going to be in 2 to 3 years. The fact that actually people can build digital businesses or digital products, like it's just going to accelerate. So I think that's super exciting, right? And you touched on it earlier. Smaller teams can do a lot more. You can test and learn much faster. And I think what's going to happen is that AI is going to remove friction more and more kind of in that product process. It's going to simplify user journeys. There's going to be stuff which we can't even foresee right now in terms of like how it's going to make, huge impact in terms of like customer journeys, user journeys, that type of thing. So like I said, I still think speed needs validation, and strong execution will still matter. But I think at least in my world, in terms of sort of what excites me about the future and about product development and for businesses, I think that's what I'd have to say. It's sort of, I guess, in a positive way, commoditizing. It's exactly what you said earlier. It's commoditizing. It's giving the little guy an opportunity against the big guys, and also giving the big guys, opportunity as well. So I just think that's super exciting.
I think the consumers and everything wins, right? Because you got more innovation, more advancement to be able to support and solve the problems that we all face. So I think it's a great thing. And then I guess, what would be the one thing you would like to leave leaders with today from the pod in terms of your advice about where to begin in terms of innovation?
Don't start with technology. Would probably be my default answer. So start with the problem. Start with who is it for? What are the outcomes that matter? What is the smallest useful version, that you can kind of release? Validate before kind of major spend. Like, 85% of digital initiatives still fail. Like, it's that big. I mean, for Wexer to get where it's got to is phenomenal. Like the job that you guys have done is incredible. But it's not common. It's not the norm, right? And so I think, so for me, it's just don't get attracted to, there's this new technology, therefore we've got to do this. It's like, no, start with the business problem, start with the customer problem, and take it from there. And I know that's very boring, very old advice, but
it's solid. It still rings true. You know what I mean? Like, it is probably, if there's one trend that I've spoken to with so many technology leaders, or just leaders in general, it's always that. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Yeah, and then I guess the last thing for listeners as well is, where can the audience learn more about NuForm and stay connected in terms of connecting with yourself?
Yeah, just all the obvious places. NuFormDigital.com. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, so is the business. We're sort of pushing our Instagram a little bit more, whether or not, Alex or Mosey keeps talking about content, so I'm sort of like thinking I may as well do it. But just all the usual places. And if anyone wants to have a chat, just reach out.
Everything that you've shared today, as I said at the top of the call, Adam's been one of these people that a lot of his sayings have always ring true. I think over years that's a good test of how smart a person is. So I would really heavily recommend anyone listening that is looking to engage with or just chat about this space and how NuForm can support their business. It's definitely worth the call. So, look, Adam, thank you so much for joining us, and we need to do this more often.
Absolutely. No, look, thanks. Hopefully it's been helpful, and there's some good insight there. And as always, great to chat to you, Paul.
Thank you, Adam. Bye for now.
Cheers, bud.